Christmas night draped the battlefield in white silence. Through the radio static, an elite unit whispered their final words. "We're surrounded." When the rifle passed into her hands, everyone froze. The bolt cracked, the scope misaligned, the barrel warped. A weapon meant for disposal. No one spoke. No one believed. She only pulled her collar higher, fingers brushing the cold dog tag beneath her winter camouflage. Across the valley, the enemy commander orchestrated the massacre. And that Christmas night, with a broken rifle, she decided to end the war with a single shot. The snow fell in thick curtains across the valley, each flake catching the crimson glow of distant flares. It was December 24th, 2300 hours, and the world had gone silent except for the whisper of wind through frozen pines. Captain Nathan Thorne pressed his back against the rocky outcrop, his breath forming clouds in the sub-zero air. Around him, 12 operators from JSOC Task Force Griffin huddled in whatever cover the terrain provided. They were supposed to be 60 kilometers south, celebrating a quiet Christmas at Forward Operating Base Sentinel. Instead, they were pinned in Devil's Throat Valley, with half their ammunition gone and no clear route to extraction. Griffin 1 to Overwatch. Thorne spoke into his radio, keeping his voice level despite the tightening in his chest. Still no visual on extraction birds. What's our status? The response crackled with interference. Overwatch to Griffin 1. Weather's grounding everything. UAV took fire. Lost the feed at 2,247. You're dark until dawn. Maintain position and day. The transmission died. Sergeant Marcus Hayes, crouched 3 meters away behind a fallen log, caught Thorne's eye. 20 years in special operations had taught Hayes to read situations without words. This one was clear. They were alone. How many? Thorne asked. Hayes had been counting muzzle flashes for the past hour. Estimate 40 to 50 hostiles. But that's not what worries me, sir. What does? They're not shooting wild. Every burst is controlled. Every position they take is strategic. Someone's conducting this like a symphony. Thorne knew Hayes was right. The enemy wasn't a ragtag militia. Their movements showed discipline, patience, and most damning of all, perfect coordination. Somewhere in the darkness, an unseen commander was orchestrating their deaths with surgical precision. Lieutenant Brianna Walsh, the unit's communications specialist, crawled over from her position. Her face was streaked with dirt and ice. "Sir, I've been monitoring their radio chatter. It's encrypted, but I'm catching patterns. Every 5 minutes there's a burst transmission from the North Ridge. I think that's their command post." "How far?" 1,200 meters. Maybe 13. Thorne did the math. At that distance, in these conditions, with the equipment they had left, an assault was suicide. They'd be cut down before they got halfway. Another flare burst overhead, painting the snow red. In that brief illumination, Thorne saw the exhaustion in his team's faces. They'd been operating for 18 hours straight. Before this ambush, they'd successfully raided an enemy supply depot. It was supposed to be a quick in and out. Instead, they'd walked into something much larger. "They knew we were coming," Hayes said quietly. "This wasn't random. They set the trap and waited." The implications settled over them like the falling snow. Intelligence failure, compromised operation. And now, a Christmas Eve that might be their last. Private First Class Jordan Chen, barely 22 years old, shifted his position to get better cover. The movement saved his life. A 3-round burst tore through the space where his head had been, sending splinters of bark into the air. "Contact north, 2 o'clock, someone shouted. The valley erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like demonic fireworks. Thorne's team returned fire, their shots disciplined and measured. They couldn't afford to waste ammunition. The exchange lasted 45 seconds, then silence returned. "Status," Thorne called. "Chen's hit. Shoulder wound. Through and through. He'll live." That was Staff Sergeant Elena Vargas, their medic, already working on the young soldier. But they all understood the underlying message. They couldn't take many more wounded. Medical supplies were running low, and Vargas could only work miracles for so long. Thorne checked his watch. 2,347 hours. 13 minutes until Christmas Day. He thought about his daughter, probably asleep by now, dreaming of presents under the tree. He thought about his ex-wife, who'd made him promise to come home safe. He thought about the promise he might not be able to keep. Griffin 1 to Overwatch. Emergency traffic. Thorne tried the radio again. Nothing but static. They were truly alone. Hayes crawled closer. "Sir, we need a new play. We can hold this position maybe 3-4 hours. But when dawn comes and they can see clearly." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Walsh, still monitoring enemy communications, suddenly tensed. "Sir, major transmission burst. They're coordinating something big. I think they're preparing for a final push." Thorne felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. 12 lives depending on his decisions. 12 families waiting for Christmas reunions that might never happen. The snow continued falling, peaceful and indifferent to the violence below. Somewhere in the distance, Thorne could almost hear Christmas music, a phantom memory of holidays past, church bells, warm fires, laughter. None of that existed here. Only the cold, the darkness, and the calculating mind of an enemy commander who held all the advantages. "We're going to need a miracle," Chen said through gritted teeth as Vargas bandaged his shoulder. Hayes, ever the realist, chambered a fresh round. "Miracles are in short supply out here, kid." But unknown to them all, a miracle was already on its way. It would arrive in the form of a woman they'd never met, carrying a rifle that shouldn't work, with a skill set that officially didn't exist. And she would change everything. She arrived without fanfare at 0012 hours, materializing from the snowstorm like a ghost. No insignia, no unit patch, just winter camouflage and a face that gave nothing away. Captain Thorne saw her first, his weapon halfway raised before recognizing the friendly IR marker on her shoulder. "Identify yourself. Call sign Frost," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the wind. "Command sent me." Hayes emerged from cover, his eyes narrowing. "Just you?" "Just me." The two operators exchanged glances. Thorne keyed his radio despite knowing it was dead. "Overwatch, confirm lone operative, call sign Frost?" Only static answered. The woman calling herself Frost moved with economy, each step deliberate, wasting no energy. She assessed their position in seconds, her gaze sweeping the defensive perimeter like she was reading a map only she could see. "How many shooters?" she asked. 40 plus, Thorne replied. "Coordinated, professional, commanded from the North Ridge, approximately 1,200 meters." Frost nodded once, as if this confirmed something she already suspected. She unslung her pack and set it down with care. Walsh, watching from her position, leaned toward Chen. "You ever heard of a Frost?" The young private shook his head, wincing as his wounded shoulder protested the movement. "No patch, no unit identifier. Maybe she's agency? Or maybe command's getting desperate," Walsh muttered. If Frost heard the skepticism, she didn't react. She moved to the edge of their perimeter, studying the terrain through the snowfall. Her hands were bare despite the cold, and Thorne noticed the scar's old burns on her knuckles, a surgical line across her left palm. Hayes joined Thorne, speaking low enough that only his captain could hear. "Sir, with respect, one more gun doesn't change our situation. We're still outnumbered, low on ammo, and cut off." "I know, Sergeant. And honestly..." Hayes paused, choosing his words carefully. "A woman? In these conditions? Against a force this size?" Thorne understood the doubt. It wasn't about capability. He'd served with exceptional female operators before. It was about the mathematics of their situation. They needed a battalion, not one more soldier, regardless of gender. But something about Frost made him hesitate to dismiss her presence. The way she moved, the absolute stillness in her posture, the fact that she'd made it through enemy lines alone in a blizzard. "Let's see what she brought," Thorne decided. He approached Frost, who was now kneeling in the snow, examining the battlefield with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every detail. "What's your specialty?" "Long-range precision. A sniper." That changed things slightly. Maybe she could thin their numbers, buy them more time. "What's your equipment status?" he asked. That's when Frost's expression shifted, just slightly. Not quite a grimace, but close. "That's going to be a problem." Vargas, finished with Chen's bandaging, had been watching the newcomer with professional curiosity. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that starts with an ammunition depot taking a direct hit," Frost replied. She stood, brushing snow from her knees. I need to see your weapons. They took her to their makeshift armory, a shallow depression covered by a tarp, where they'd consolidated their remaining equipment. 2 rifles damaged beyond use, a machine gun with a cracked feed mechanism, sidearms running low on magazines, and in the corner, wrapped in an oiled cloth, 1 last long rifle. Hayes unwrapped it, then stopped. Ah, hell. Even in the dim light of their red-filtered flashlights, the damage was obvious. The bolt assembly showed a hairline fracture. The scope sat at a cant, its mounting rail bent. The barrel, when Frost ran her finger along it, had a subtle warp that would send bullets spiraling off target. That's our only precision weapon? She asked. Was supposed to be a backup, Thorne explained. The primary rifle took shrapnel in the firefight. This one's been in storage, must have been damaged and never reported. Lieutenant Walsh crossed her arms. Can't be fired. The bolt'll jam or break completely. The scope's useless. And even if you could somehow shoot it, the barrel's going to spray rounds everywhere except where you aim. Frost picked up the rifle anyway. Her hands moved with practiced familiarity, checking the action, testing the trigger pull, feeling the weight distribution. The others watched in silence. Chen, propped against a rock with his shoulder bandaged, spoke what they were all thinking. No offense, but that thing's scrap metal. You'd be better off throwing rocks. Frost didn't respond immediately. She disassembled the bolt with quick, efficient movements, examining each component by touch as much as sight. Her fingers traced the fracture line, probed the spring tension, tested the firing pin. It'll fire once, she finally said. Maybe twice if I'm lucky. Once? Hayes's voice carried disbelief. Against 40 hostiles? That doesn't help us. Depends on what that one shot accomplishes. The statement hung in the frozen air. Thorne studied the woman before him, trying to read her through years of experience evaluating operators. She wasn't posturing, wasn't overconfident. She'd stated a simple fact. This rifle would fire once, and she intended to make it count. You're talking about the commander, Thorne said. Frost met his eyes directly. Remove the head, the body dies. That's doctrine. At 1,200 meters, through a snowstorm, with a broken rifle? 1,300, Walsh corrected. I rechecked the coordinates. Frost absorbed this information without reaction. She continued her examination of the weapon, her movements methodical and unhurried despite the impossible task she was suggesting. Vargas shook her head. This is insane. We should focus on defense, make them pay for every meter, hope extraction arrives before they overrun us. Extraction's not coming before dawn, Frost replied quietly. You know it, they know it, and by dawn, they'll have clear sight lines to pick you apart. The brutal honesty silenced the group. Because she was right. They all knew she was right. Hayes crouched beside her, his voice taking on a different tone, not dismissive now, but genuinely curious. Who are you? Really? Your file says Frost, but that's not a name. It's a ghost designation. Reserved for operators who've been burned, buried, or both. For the first time, something flickered across Frost's expression. Memory. Pain. Both. Does it matter? She asked. It does, if you're asking me to bet 12 lives on your ability. Frost continued working on the rifle, her hands never stopping. 3 years ago, I held the record for longest confirmed elimination, 2,100 meters. Then I made a decision that cost me my career. The records were sealed. My name was removed from official rosters. I became convenient to forget. What decision? Chen asked. The kind that saved 43 civilians and embarrassed people with stars on their shoulders. Frost's voice remained flat, factual. Politics won, I lost. Now I work problems that officially don't have solutions. Thorne felt the pieces clicking into place. Ghost operators, black missions, the kind of warfare that never made reports. And tonight? Tonight, Command remembered I exist, because you're out of options, and I'm an option they can deny if this goes wrong. The calculation was cold but clear. If Frost failed, Command could claim they sent no one. If she succeeded, they'd attribute it to luck or enemy error. Either way, she remained erased from history. Walsh crossed to the broken rifle, examining it with fresh perspective. Even if you are that good, and I'm not saying you aren't, this weapon is beyond unreliable. The scope alone. I don't use scopes, Frost said. The silence that followed was profound. Hayes finally broke it with a low whistle. You're going to make a 1,300-meter shot in a snowstorm with a broken rifle, using iron sights that aren't calibrated? No, Frost corrected, her fingers still working the bolt mechanism with infinite patience. I'm going to make a 1,300-meter shot with no sights at all. Just mathematics, experience, and an understanding of how badly fate wants to see if I can pull this off. She looked up at them then, and for the first time, they saw something beyond the professional mask. Not quite a smile, more like the expression of someone who'd already made peace with an impossible task. You want a miracle, she said. I'm what's left when miracles run out. The question is, are you willing to bet on broken things doing extraordinary work? Captain Thorne thought about his daughter, his team. The enemy commander, somewhere in the darkness, moving pieces on a chessboard of death. He thought about Christmas, and promises, and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. How long do you need? He asked. Frost gathered the broken rifle, her movements decisive now. Give me an hour to read the wind, and pray I remember how to make broken things whole. As she moved toward the perimeter's edge, Hayes called after her, Hey, Frost, what's your real name? She paused, her back still to them, a silhouette against falling snow. Does it matter? She repeated. Names are for people who get to exist. I'm just a tool someone remembered to use. And with that, she disappeared into the darkness, carrying a rifle that shouldn't work toward a shot that couldn't be made. Behind her, 12 operators looked at each other with the same unspoken question. Did command send them salvation, or just another way to fail? Only the snow knew, and it wasn't telling. Frost found her position 70 meters west of the main defensive perimeter, a shallow ridge that offered concealment and a partial view of the northern valley. She moved with the patience of someone who understood that speed was the enemy of precision. The broken rifle lay before her on a plastic sheet, protected from the snow. She disassembled it completely, laying each component in order: bolt, spring, firing pin, trigger assembly. The barrel she examined last, holding it up to catch what little light filtered through the storm clouds. The warp was subtle, maybe 5 degrees over the barrel's length. But at 1,300 meters, 5 degrees would send a bullet 3 meters off target. Might as well be a mile. Behind her, she heard movement. Careful, professional, someone who knew how to approach a sniper without startling them. That's close enough, Sergeant Hayes, Frost said without turning. Hayes stopped, impressed despite himself. Heard me through the storm? Smelled your weapon oil. You used the old military issue, not the new synthetic blend. Distinct. He settled into a crouch 5 meters back, respecting the boundary. Captain sent me to observe. Make sure you're not crazy. And your assessment? Still determining that. Hayes watched as Frost reassembled the bolt mechanism, her fingers working by feel in the darkness. I looked you up in the database. Found nothing. No Frost. No female snipers matching your approximate age and build. You're a ghost in the machine. That's the idea. Why'd they really bury you? Frost paused, her hands still on the rifle. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, I took a shot I wasn't authorized to take. Eliminated a target I wasn't authorized to engage. Saved people I wasn't authorized to protect. And the target was paying 3 generals and a senator. Those people I saved couldn't vote or donate to campaigns. The math wasn't complicated. Hayes absorbed this. You traded your career for people who couldn't repay you. Some debts aren't meant to be repaid. They're just meant to be right. She lifted the rifle, sighting down the warped barrel. Even without firing, she could feel how wrong it was. The balance off, the action sticky. This weapon wanted to fail. Can you actually make this shot? Hayes asked. The skepticism was gone from his voice now, replaced by genuine curiosity. I don't know. The honesty surprised him. But you're going to try anyway. The enemy commander is patient, careful, and precise. Everything about this ambush shows experience. He won't make mistakes. He'll wait until conditions favor him completely. Then he'll crush your unit in a single coordinated strike. Frost turned to face Hayes directly. Your captain knows this. You know this. The only chance is removing the commander before dawn. Even if the odds are against you? Especially then. Miracles only happen when probability says they shouldn't. Hayes studied her profile against the snow. You really believe that? No, Frost admitted, but I've spent 3 years doing impossible things that officially never happened. Tonight's just one more. She returned her attention to the rifle. The scope was completely useless, the mounting rail bent beyond field repair. She removed it entirely, tossing it aside. The iron sights were misaligned, but she'd accounted for that. At this range, she'd be shooting on instinct anyway, using decades of muscle memory and an understanding of ballistics that went beyond conscious thought. "Tell me about your weapon failures," Frost said suddenly. "Ma'am? Your special operations, 20-year career minimum. You've had equipment fail in the field. Tell me about the worst time." Hayes was quiet for a moment, remembering. Afghanistan, 2019. Firefight in the Hindu Kush. My rifle's extractor broke, couldn't eject spent casings, had to manually clear each round. How'd you adapt? Slowed my rate of fire, made every shot count. Survived by accepting the limitation instead of fighting it. Frost nodded. This rifle has maybe 2 shots before the bolt fractures completely. Maybe 1 if I'm unlucky. So, I don't fight the limitation. I embrace it. 1 shot, 1 target, 1 outcome. And if you miss, then you were going to die anyway. At least this way, you die knowing someone tried the impossible. The brutal calculus hung between them. Hayes had been in combat long enough to appreciate honesty over false hope. What do you need from us? Time, silence. And if you hear the shot, don't react, don't move, don't give away that anything's changed. Let the enemy wonder. How will we know if you succeeded? Frost smiled then, and it was the saddest expression Hayes had ever seen. If I succeed, the enemy coordination falls apart, their discipline breaks, they start making mistakes, you'll know. And if you fail? Then I'll have fired the last shot of my life with a broken rifle in a snowstorm on Christmas morning, trying to save people I've never met. There are worse endings. Hayes wanted to argue, to inject some optimism, but something about Frost's demeanor stopped him. She'd made peace with this, the mission, the odds, the possible consequences. She was the kind of operator who understood that some battles were won not through strength, but through the willingness to stand in impossible spaces and refuse to yield. "Captain Thorne wanted me to ask," Hayes said carefully, "if you have family, people who should be notified." I was erased, remember? Officially, I don't exist. Can't notify the family of someone who never was. Unofficially? Frost was quiet for a long time. There was a daughter, 8 years old when they buried me. She'd be 11 now. Thinks I died in training. That's better than the truth. Which is? That her mother was too inconvenient to keep alive on paper. The pain in those words was carefully controlled, but Hayes heard it anyway. He thought about his own kids, safe in a suburb somewhere, believing their father was doing important work. They were right, but they'd never understand the cost. "For what it's worth," Hayes said, "I hope your daughter knows you were one of the good ones." "She won't." "That's the point." Frost checked her watch. "You should get back. I have work to do, and you're a distraction." Hayes stood, brushing snow from his knees. "Frost? Whatever happens, thank you for coming. Not many people would walk into this deliberately. Maybe I'm just tired of being a ghost. Maybe I want one more chance to be real, even if it's only for a single shot." As Hayes moved back toward the main position, Frost returned to her rifle. She ran her hands along the warped barrel one more time, feeling the imperfection, understanding how it would affect bullet trajectory. Mathematics flooded her mind: wind speed, air density, the Coriolis effect at this latitude, the drop over 1,300 meters. Then she pushed all the calculations aside. Numbers only took you so far. The rest was instinct, experience, and the strange conversation between a shooter and her weapon. Even broken things could sometimes remember what they were meant to do. She thought about her daughter, imagined her opening presents tomorrow morning, laughing, whole, believing her mother was a hero who died with honor. That was worth more than truth, worth more than existence, worth one impossible shot with a rifle that shouldn't work. Frost settled into position, the broken weapon cradled in her arms, and began the slow process of becoming still. Not just physically still, but mentally, emotionally. She needed to be a blank space in the universe, empty of everything except purpose. The snow fell heavier now. Christmas morning approached, and in the darkness, A broken woman with a broken rifle prepared to attempt the impossible. Because sometimes, that's all that's left. The snow fell harder now, each flake a small weight adding to the accumulation on Frost's shoulders, her rifle, the ground around her. She'd been motionless for 40 minutes, letting her body temperature drop to match the environment, becoming part of the frozen landscape. But her mind was elsewhere. Another Christmas, another battlefield, another choice. 8 years ago. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Frost, she'd had a full name then, an identity. A file that said she existed knelt in a similar position, rifle trained on a compound 300 meters distant. The mission was clean, observe and report, nothing more. But through her scope, she'd seen them. 12 civilians, women and children huddled in a room that was about to become a kill zone. The target, a high-value insurgent commander, had positioned them deliberately, human shields. He knew American rules of engagement. Frost, you are not cleared to engage. Her commander's voice had crackled through her earpiece. Observe only. Strike team is en route. Strike team was 40 minutes out. The insurgent commander was preparing to execute the civilians in 10 minutes, knowing it would force American forces to either watch or break protocol. Rebecca had done the math. 12 lives versus her career. The choice should have been complicated. It wasn't. She'd taken the shot. Thread needle precision through a 6-inch gap between two human shields, traveling 300 meters to find the insurgent commander's temple. He dropped instantly. The civilians lived. The strike team arrived to find the target neutralized and no American forces officially present. The after-action report had been a masterwork of bureaucratic sanitization. Insurgent commander killed by internal faction fighting. The rescued civilians mentioned a ghost, an angel, something that couldn't be explained. And Staff Sergeant Rebecca Frost ceased to exist, burned, buried, transformed into a ghost designation. Frost. No first name, no past. Just a tool to be used when official channels needed unofficial solutions. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd saved 12 people and lost herself. But on quiet nights, when the weight of anonymity pressed heaviest, she'd remember their faces. The mother holding 2 children. The old man shielding 3 teenagers. They were alive because she'd chosen their existence over her own. Some mathematics didn't need questioning. Present. Devil's Throat Valley. Frost's fingers, numb now despite her cold weather training, adjusted the broken rifle's position by millimeters. The memory of that Christmas 8 years ago settled over her like a familiar coat. Heavy, but worn enough to be comfortable. Her daughter would be asleep now. Emily. Named after Frost's grandmother, a woman who'd never backed down from hard choices. Emily would wake in a few hours to presents and pancakes, believing her mother was a training accident memorial. A name on a wall somewhere, a photograph in a frame. Better that than knowing the truth, that her mother was a living ghost, erased for the crime of choosing conscience over command. "I'm sorry, baby girl," Frost whispered to the falling snow, knowing Emily would never hear. "I'm sorry I can't be there for your Christmas mornings, but I can make sure 12 other soldiers get to have theirs." The wind shifted, southwest now, gusting to 12 knots. Frost felt it against her cheek, calculated the deflection automatically. The broken barrel would push the round right, the wind would push it left. If she could balance those opposing forces perfectly, thread the needle one more time. Her radio crackled softly, Captain Thorne's voice barely above a whisper. "Frost, enemy activity increasing. They're massing for an assault. We have maybe 30 minutes. "Understood," she replied, her voice steady despite the cold. "Can you?" Thorne paused. "Can you see the target yet?" "No visual, but I can feel him. He's there, in the command post, patient, waiting for perfect conditions." "That makes 2 of you." Frost almost smiled at that. Yes, she and the enemy commander were the same in many ways. Both patient, both willing to wait for the perfect shot, the perfect moment. The difference was that he commanded from safety while she lay in the snow with a weapon that barely qualified as functional. Another memory surfaced. Emily at 5 years old, struggling to tie her shoes. Frustrated, ready to give up. "Mama, it's too hard." Then we break it into smaller problems. Not tie the shoe, but make a loop. then wrap the other lace around, then pull through. Every big problem is just a bunch of little problems pretending. Emily had looked at her with those wide, trusting eyes. And if the little problems are too hard, then we try anyway. Because trying is what brave people do. The shoe had been tied eventually. Crooked, loose, but tied, and Emily had beamed like she'd conquered the world. Frost missed that smile with a physical ache that rivaled the cold seeping into her bones. She keyed her radio again. "Captain, I need something from your team. Name it. When this is over, assuming we survive, I need you to send a letter for me. There's a girl in Denver, Emily Frost. She'll be 11 next month. The letter will say I died tonight, honorably, protecting soldiers. It'll be a lie, but she deserves better than silence." The radio was quiet for several heartbeats. Then, "You'll deliver it yourself." "No, I won't. One shot, Captain, maybe two, and if the bolt fractures." She didn't finish. They both understood. "Frost, just promise me. A daughter deserves to know her mother tried to be good, even if she can't know the truth." Another pause. "You have my word." "Thank you." Frost settled deeper into her position. The memory of Emily's smile stayed with her, a warm light against the cold. This is what she'd lost. This is what others would keep. The 12 soldiers in Thorne's unit would go home. They'd hug their children, kiss their partners, sit around Christmas trees, and remember the impossible night they survived. And somewhere in that collective memory, Frost would exist as a ghost, a rumor, something that happened but couldn't be explained. That was enough. It had to be enough. She thought about the promise she'd made to herself 8 years ago, kneeling in Afghan sand while bureaucrats erased her existence. Never again. Never let good people die because the convenient choice was easier than the right one. That promise had cost her everything. Her career, her identity, her relationship with her daughter. But it had saved lives, dozens of them now. Operations that never made reports, interventions that officially never occurred. Each one burning away another piece of who she'd been, transforming her into pure function. The ghost designation fit better than she'd like to admit. "Frost to Griffin 1, she whispered into her radio. "I have a question." "Go ahead. Your team. Do they have families?" "Most of them. Hayes has 2 boys. Walsh has a husband and a daughter. Chen's engaged. Vargas has aging parents who depend on her." "Why?" "Just needed to remember why I'm lying in the snow with a broken rifle, contemplating impossible geometry." "And now, you remember?" "Yes, sir, I remember." She clicked off the radio and returned to absolute stillness. The mathematics of the shot played through her mind one final time. 1,300 meters, warped barrel pushing right, wind pushing left. Bullet drop of nearly 3 meters. Temperature affecting air density. The broken scope mount meaning no electronic calculation, no laser ranging, just eyes and experience, and the kind of muscle memory that existed beyond conscious thought. It was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. But she'd promised herself 8 years ago that impossible was just another word for necessary. And tonight, 12 soldiers needed the impossible to become real. The snow continued falling, peaceful and indifferent. Somewhere in the darkness, an enemy commander prepared his final assault. He had every advantage: numbers, position, weapons, time. He had everything except knowledge of the broken woman with a broken rifle who decided his fate was already sealed. Frost thought one more time about Emily, about Christmas mornings that could never happen, about a daughter who deserved a mother but would have to settle for a memory. "Merry Christmas, baby girl," she whispered to the snow. "Mama's working, Mama's always working." Her finger moved to the trigger. The broken rifle settled into the cradle of her shoulder like an old friend accepting its final mission. And across 1,300 meters of darkness, wind, and falling snow, a commander who thought himself invulnerable continued planning a massacre. He had perhaps 5 minutes left to live. He just didn't know it yet. The hardest part of eliminating a target isn't the shot. It's confirming you're aiming at the right person. Frost had been watching the enemy's pattern for 90 minutes now, and a picture was forming. Not through her eyes, the darkness and snow prevented visual confirmation, but through something more fundamental, the rhythm of battle, the mathematics of command. Every coordinated strike against Thorne's position originated from the North Ridge. But more than that, Every attack showed specific characteristics: conservative ammunition usage, prioritizing suppression over elimination, systematic probing of defensive weaknesses. This wasn't chaotic aggression. This was chess. And chess required a grandmaster. Frost keyed her radio, voice barely audible. Griffin 1, next time they probe your position, I need your team to deliberately expose the eastern flank for exactly 5 seconds. Make it look accidental. Frost. That's suicide. They'll exploit it immediately. I'm counting on it. 5 seconds. Your people need to trust me. She could almost hear Thorne's internal debate. Finally, on your mark. Frost waited, watched, felt the battlefield's pulse. She'd spent 22 years learning to read combat the way musicians read sheet music. Every action had a tempo, every decision a note. Now, she said softly. Through the darkness, she heard, rather than saw, Thorne's team shift position. A gap opened in their eastern perimeter, small, brief, but deliberate enough that a skilled observer would catch it. The enemy response came within 8 seconds. A 3-round burst targeting the exposed flank, followed immediately by suppression fire to prevent Thorne's team from recovering. Professional, precise, but more importantly, the sequence showed advanced coordination. Someone had seen the opportunity, analyzed it, and issued commands to multiple units in under 10 seconds. Frost's eyes, already adapted to near-total darkness, caught something else, a brief, faint glow on the north ridge. Just for a moment, probably a radio transmission screen, quickly shielded, but not quickly enough. Grid coordinates, Frost whispered into her radio, reading off the numbers that would mean nothing to most people but everything to military cartographers. Lieutenant Walsh's voice came back. Confirmed. That's the elevated position we identified earlier. 1,300 meters, bearing 347 degrees. But Frost needed more than coordinates. She needed confirmation that eliminating this specific position would decapitate the enemy's command structure, not just remove another soldier. Captain, Frost said, I need your team to stage a false retreat. Make it convincing. I need to see how the enemy commander responds to perceived success. That's Thorne stopped himself. He understood. If the enemy thought they were winning, the commander would either press the advantage or show restraint. Either response would reveal his strategic thinking. Do it carefully, Frost added. This is theater, not actual retreat. Copy that. Hayes, you copy? Copy. Staging controlled withdrawal, eastern position. What happened next was a masterclass in military deception. Thorne's team, under Hayes' coordination, began a fake retreat that looked panicked but remained tactically sound. Weapons fire became sporadic. Radio chatter increased deliberate, garbled, suggesting confusion. The enemy's response told Frost everything she needed to know. Instead of immediate pursuit, there was a pause. 15 seconds of absolute stillness while the enemy commander assessed whether the retreat was genuine or a trap. Then, the coordinated advance began, but cautiously, maintaining defensive spacing, keeping support fire positions active. Brilliant, disciplined, paranoid. This was someone who'd survived long enough to know that desperation could be a weapon, someone who wouldn't sacrifice troops for a quick victory when patience would yield certain success. Break contact, Frost ordered. Return to position. Thorne's team smoothly transitioned back to defensive posture. The enemy advance halted immediately, confirming that their commander recognized the feint. But that moment of command decision had cost him. Frost had been watching thermal patterns through a small handheld scope, not strong enough for targeting, but sufficient for detecting body heat. During those 15 seconds of assessment, she'd caught it. A heat signature slightly elevated from the surrounding positions, protected by more cover, issuing orders rather than fighting. Target confirmed, Frost reported. North Ridge, designated position Alpha 7, single occupant, command profile. How certain? Thorne asked. 80% based on tactical response patterns. 95% based on thermal signature and defensive positioning. As certain as I can be without visual confirmation. In the silence that followed, Frost imagined Thorne doing the same calculation she'd already completed. If she was right, one shot would fracture enemy cohesion. If she was wrong, she'd eliminate a senior NCO or advisor, which would still degrade enemy capability but wouldn't achieve decapitation. Either way, the odds favored taking the shot. "Frost," Thorne said carefully. "The distance is anyone $7. 1,340 meters, she interrupted. Wind southwest at 14 knots, gusting to 18. Temperature dropping, which means air density increasing, which means more bullet drop. Snowfall degrading visibility beyond 400 meters. Warped barrel pushing rounds right by approximately 3 degrees. And a bolt that might fracture on first firing. And you can make this shot?" Frost thought about all the impossible shots she'd made over her career. The shots that ended up in classified files, whispered about but never confirmed. The shots that transformed her from Rebecca Frost, person with a life and family, into just Frost, the ghost designation. "I can try," she said. "That's all anyone can do." What she didn't say. At this distance, with these conditions, with this weapon, the shot required a combination of skill, mathematics, and something that couldn't be quantified. Call it fate, luck, or the universe's sense of irony. A broken woman with a broken rifle, attempting to prove that broken things could still accomplish extraordinary work. "Give me 5 minutes," Frost added. "The wind pattern is shifting. I need to feel it stabilize." "You have 3, Thorne replied. "Enemies massing for final assault. I'm seeing movement from multiple directions. They're coordinating," which meant the commander was active, issuing orders, presenting a target. But also undercover, protected, only partially exposed during radio transmissions. Frost would get one moment, one shot, one chance to thread a bullet through impossible geometry to reach a target she could barely confirm existed. She adjusted her position by millimeters, feeling the frozen ground beneath her, becoming part of it. The broken rifle settled into her shoulder like an extension of her body. She'd made peace with it now, accepted its flaws, understood that trying to compensate for every imperfection would only introduce more error. Sometimes you had to let the weapon be what it was and trust your instinct to navigate its limitations. The mathematics played through her mind one final time: muzzle velocity, ballistic coefficient, wind deflection, barrel cant, atmospheric pressure. Then she released all of it, trusting muscle memory and 22 years of experience. Through her radio earpiece, she heard the soft sounds of Thorne's team preparing for the enemy's final assault, magazines being changed, last-minute position adjustments, the quiet breathing of soldiers who understood they might be living their final minutes. And across 1,340 meters of darkness, an enemy commander issued orders that would, if successful, end 12 American lives before dawn. But dawn was still 2 hours away. And fate had just handed Frost a 5-second window where the commander would be exposed, transmitting orders, unaware that someone had been reading his patterns like sheet music. She checked her watch. 2 minutes until the window opened. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The cold faded to distant sensation. This was the space beyond thought, beyond fear, where only purpose existed. One shot, one target.